The question is, what do I think about the assault weapons ban in Virginia? Let me preface this by saying one thing. My mother's family is originally from Virginia. Well, two things. Well, three. My dad's family is originally from DC. However, my dad was in the military, and I effectively grew up in Germany. So, with that being said, um, in a way, well, not in a way, just to be blunt, uh, firearms ownership and the firearms tradition of um, that is unique to the United States has been pretty heavy on both sides of my family. I'm not talking about the European side of my family, of course, since my grandmother is French. I'm talking about the black or African American sides of my family, both sides. Um, I have some aunts who are anti Second Amendment, which is fine, but I'll say this. In Virginia itself, in the Virginia Constitution, to my understanding, and just the core of Virginia since the founding, it's been embedded with um, firearms ownership. What we have now in Virginia is a setup where there's one major population center that swings the vote one direction every single election cycle. The vast majority of the people that live in that population center are not Virginians. They're not from Virginia. Um, they don't have that Virginian tradition, which includes firearms ownership. There's a uh, sense of helpfulness, I guess you could say, um, camaraderie and courtesy that culturally that Virginians have, black, white, whatever, that effectively no longer exists in the Northern Virginia area. There's also a deeper sense of community and a sense of family that's no longer there. With that being said, right now the governor, to my understanding, the lieutenant governor, and a lot of the left-leaning politicians in Virginia that push this assault weapons ban um, are from different states. Now, the attorney general is from Richmond, but I believe Spamberger is from New Jersey. The lieutenant governor is from originally from India. Um, the one of the two gentlemen that wrote the assault weapons bans that were passed. One was Dan Helmer, and the other gentleman's from originally from Bangladesh. Um, the reason why I bring that up is because this single population center is enough that people who don't have the local customs and traditions of a state can effectively come in and with enough votes tell the people of that state what is best for them, even though that culturally just doesn't align with anything. With that whole prefaced statement being prefaced, I guess you could say, the assault weapons ban, the way it's written, the one that's passed, uh, defines assault weapons in such a range that it covers the majority of modern rifles, pistols, and shotguns. Now, a lot of people don't understand that. Um, they assume when they hear it that it's most people I've talked to who don't keep up with Virginia politics assume that the ban is just going to um, affect automatic weapons, which are not in wide circulation. There are still people who think that you can go into a store and buy automatic weapons. That's when they hear about the assault weapons ban, that's what they think of. Um, I think when you look at the larger picture, when you see the assault weapons ban and how it's written and the just vast amount of firearms that it touches, when you combine that with the additional anti-gun legislations, pieces of legislation that they passed, it creates a environment where um, not only will you think twice about purchasing a firearm and becoming a firearms owner, it's also going to push out a lot of businesses. There's a business liability bill. So if an FFL sells someone else a firearm, um, if they use it in a malicious manner or in a manner in which someone gets hurt, for example, they can sue the manufacturer, and I believe they could also sue the FFL because of the one who did the sale. Now, I already know of some stores who have closed up uh, preemptively. I don't think that a lot of the businesses, I don't think a lot of the gun ranges, I don't think a lot of the dealers, I don't think they will survive long term based on just how these pieces of legislation are written. Um, there's safe storage laws, so if you have firearms in your house, if there's minors there, you have to keep them all locked up, which is fine. I think most people do that, but that's not something that you can actively enforce. That only comes in if something happens in your house. You have a child, someone walks in, law enforcement walks in, sees a unsecured firearm, and then you get, a charge. Now, why are they doing this? It's pretty obvious. They're being pushed to do it. Every Town for Gun Safety is all over the place with a lot of these politicians, and even in the articles that are written about the success of passing the gun ban and all this historical gun legislation, every town is mentioned almost universally. In fact, a number of the politicians that have in Virginia who have been pushing these bills apparently were every town volunteers. You know, that's certainly somewhat coincidental, but we'll see. But just ultimately, um, they say it's going to save lives. I disagree. The example of DC when that was under a total gun ban, DC just went downhill during that same time frame. Um, it won't really save lives because the only people who are going to follow these pieces of legislation are the law-abiding, the people who already aren't going to hurt folks with them anyways intentionally. The criminals are just going to ignore it and keep doing what they're doing. Like you ban semi-automatic firearms that have X, Y, and Z, which amounts to mostly just ergonomics and things that make your firearm easier and more comfortable to shoot. We can't have those. Meanwhile, a criminal can obtain it whenever he wants. So how do we defend ourselves? Fairfax County, to my understanding, has a law enforcement shortage, and the response time is hovering around 7 minutes, unless they're in your neighborhood. So surviving 7 minutes when someone's intent on killing you is an eternity. With my hobbies, we get to spar in 5-minute rounds, and if the other guy is really good or really big or really whatever, that 5 minutes feels like forever. So, yeah, it is what it is. I just don't think that the intent on these laws was necessarily positive. I think the intent was um, to punish current gun owners. I don't think, honestly, a lot of these laws will stand up to scrutiny as put forth by the Bruin and Heller decisions, as passed down by the Supreme Court. And from what I understand and what I've read, I don't really think it's even going to pass constitutionality of the Virginia Constitution, much less the federal one. So we'll see how it goes. Nobody I know who is currently a gun owner in this state, and I know a lot, are giving up anything. The majority of these guys really just went out and bought more and stocked up on, firearms parts and ammunition and everything. I even know some left-leaning people, like super leftists, who, always stated that they were nonviolent, they were pacifists, hate guns, etc. they're going out and buying as many as they can, which doesn't surprise me with what happened during COVID. Um, but that's another story. I'll tell you all about that later. But it's ultimately, I give it a 75% chance of it being another waste of money because the current Virginia administration is either incompetent or they didn't bother looking up or doing a deep dive into the laws that will be um, not the laws, but the what do I want to say here? The the challenge that those bills would be going through after they were passed. I don't think they thought about it or looked into it. Um, Either that or they just don't care and they'll try to see what sticks, but we'll find out. I do know that there was an injunction on these laws that was denied recently by the former Virginia AG, Ken Cuccinelli. Um, the reasoning that the judge denied the motion for injunction stated that there's no historical tradition of quote unquote military style firearms being owned by the citizenry, which sounds like they were, in my opinion, it sounds like they were finding an excuse to deny the injunction. Muskets and whatnot at the time of the founding were military style firearms. That term is only what, maybe 20 years old, military style. And if you think about it, if you look what they define as military style, um, the characteristics of what makes something military style, it's all ergonomics, folding stocks, pistol grips, threaded barrel. Like there's nothing on there really that's like super specific to the military. You know, a folding stock just makes it easier to transport. If you have a rifle or an SBR, you need the stock because without it, when you're shooting your firearm, um, you may not hit anything. You need that third point of contact. Uh, a forward pistol grip is just a stick that attaches to your gun. You know, that's not really very military-ish. There's nothing specific to the military about that. Um, yeah, I think that's it. That's my stance. Ultimately, I think it'll be overturned. I think all those anti-2A pieces of legislation should be overturned. I think ultimately they know that to some degree, and they won't get punished for it. I don't think that there's punishment for intentionally pushing forward an unconstitutional law, but we'll see. Either way, the laws are garbage. The people who wrote them really have no deep-rooted ties to the state, and yeah, we'll see what happens as it goes through the courts. Anyways, the first step really wasn't good with that denied injunction, but we'll see. That the counter argument over that decision would be really easy, I believe. Anyways, I'm out. Moving to the next question.